Milwaukee, 1991. A naked man is stumbling down the street, bleeding, barely conscious. Neighbors call 911. When police arrive, a man walks out of a nearby apartment building, calm, polite, totally normal. He tells officers the stumbling man is just his drunk boyfriend. The officers believe him. They walk the victim back to the apartment, hand him over, and leave. That man they handed back was never seen alive again, and the person they handed him to had already killed 11 people. This is the story of how one of the most dangerous killers in American history lived among ordinary people for over a decade, while the world looked the other way. Jeffrey Dahmer was born in 1960 in a quiet suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. To anyone who passed him on the street, he was unremarkable, soft-spoken, polite, the kind of person you forget the moment they leave the room. But behind that ordinary face, something had gone deeply, irreparably wrong. As a child, Dahmer was curious in disturbing ways. He collected dead animals, dissolved their flesh in acid, kept the bones. His father, a chemist, assumed it was scientific curiosity. His mother was too consumed by her own mental illness to notice, and so Jeffrey grew up in a house where no one was really watching. Surrounded by noise but completely invisible. By his teenage years, the fantasies had already started. Not violent ones, at least not at first. He later described dreaming about finding someone unconscious, someone who couldn't leave, someone he could keep forever. He didn't understand why he thought this way. He just knew the thought wouldn't go away. In 1978, Dahmer was 18 years old. His parents had just finalized their divorce. His mother had taken his younger brother and moved away. His father had temporarily moved out. For the first time in his life, Jeffrey Dahmer was completely alone. He drove down a highway and spotted a young hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, 19 years old, shirtless, heading to a concert. Dahmer offered him a ride and then an invitation, come back to the house, have some beers, hang out. Stephen said yes. For hours they talked and drank, and then Stephen stood up and said he needed to go. Something inside Dahmer snapped. He grabbed a barbell and struck Stephen from behind. Then he strangled him. Then he spent the rest of the night figuring out what to do with what remained. He dissolved the body, crushed the bones, scattered them in the woods, and then he went on with his life. For 9 years, nothing happened. He enrolled in college, dropped out, joined the army, got discharged for alcoholism, moved in with his grandmother in Wisconsin. To everyone around him, he was just a troubled young man who couldn't quite get his life together. Nobody knew that he had already crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. In 1987, it started again. Over the next 4 years, Dahmer killed 16 more men. He found them at gay bars, at bus stops, outside shopping malls. He offered them money to come back to his apartment, to pose for photos, just to spend some time. Once inside, he drugged their drinks. What happened next, I'll leave largely to your imagination. But what drove him wasn't rage, it wasn't hatred. It was the terror of being left. He wanted more than anything for someone to stay, and he had found a way to guarantee it. His neighbors complained constantly about the smell coming from his apartment. He told them his freezer had broken, that meat had spoiled. The building manager passed along the complaints. Dahmer apologized. The smell continued. Nobody called the police. Officers were summoned to his building multiple times over the years, noise complaints, disturbances. Each time, Dahmer met them at the door, calm, cooperative. He answered their questions clearly, gave reasonable explanations, and sent them on their way. He was good at seeming normal. He had been practicing his whole life. Then came the night of May 27, 1991. Konerak Sinthasomphone was 14 years old. When 2 officers found him stumbling, barely conscious, in the street outside Dahmer's building, they had every reason to be suspicious. Instead, when Dahmer appeared and calmly explained that this was his adult boyfriend, drunk after an argument, they believed him. They escorted the boy back to the apartment. They left. Konerak was Dahmer's 13th victim. 3 months later, on July 22, 1991, a man named Tracy Edwards managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment with a handcuff still attached to his wrist. He flagged down a police car. Officers followed him back to the building. They knocked on the door. Dahmer answered, calm as always. But this time, one officer noticed photographs on the wall. He looked closer, and everything changed. Inside that apartment, investigators found the evidence of 17 murders. Photographs, human remains, a freezer, a barrel. The full, horrifying scope of what had been happening in a normal apartment building, in a normal neighborhood, for years. Dahmer was arrested that night. He confessed immediately and completely. He seemed almost relieved. At trial, his defense argued insanity. The jury rejected it. He was convicted on 15 counts of murder and sentenced to 16 consecutive life terms. He never made it to the end. In November 1994, a fellow inmate beat him to death in a prison bathroom. But here is the question that this case never lets go of. Not then, not now. How many times could he have been stopped? The hitchhiker in 1978, the army which discharged him but never investigated further, the neighbors who complained for years, the officers who handed Konerak back. Every institution, every system, every person who crossed paths with Jeffrey Dahmer looked directly at him and looked away. Maybe because he was white and soft-spoken and polite. Maybe because most of his victims were young men of color, gay men, people society had already decided to pay less attention to. Maybe because evil, when it wears a calm face and speaks in complete sentences, is very hard to see. Jeffrey Dahmer didn't hide in darkness. He didn't operate in secret. He lived in a regular apartment, spoke to his neighbors in the hallway, and opened his door when the police knocked. He hid in plain sight. And that, more than anything else about this case, is what should keep you up at night. If this story made you think, subscribe. Every week we go deeper into the cases that reveal something true about the world we live in, not just who did it, but how and why and what it says about all of us. The truth is always darker than the headline. See you next time.